Okay, guys, and we're back with another episode of the Seth Solo Side Quest. I'm Seth from the Lonely Stoner podcast, and this is episode 81 of my side quest. Now, in this episode, we're going to be talking about the recent news that Ryan Bader has confirmed that he's left PFL. Now, Ryan Bader is one of these guys that actually left the UFC at a very interesting point in his career. I remember around the time he left the UFC, he was actually, if not number one, but one of the top contenders for the UFC light heavyweight title. At the time, I think DC was champion, and John Jones must have been out of the picture, might have been suspended or whatever, but DC was the champion, and it looked like DC's next fight was going to be against Ryan Bader. Ryan Bader decided to leave the UFC at that point. He joined Bellator, and to be fair, he joined Bellator, and from day one, went on winning streaks, won the Bellator light heavyweight title, would eventually lose that, then move up to heavyweight, win the Bellator heavyweight title, and I think even defend the title 2 or 3 times. I think 3 times he defended that title, so no small feat at all, and was the heavyweight champion when Bellator folded into PFL. He did, of course, go on to fight in PFL against Renan Ferreira at PFL v Bellator in February 2024, and would lose in about 20 seconds to him. So, quite, I mean, you're low-key kind of cooked, but Renan Ferreira, he's not an awful fighter, even though he got cooked by Francis Ngannou, but levels to this game, right? Levels to this game. But yeah, Ryan Bader's an interesting character because he's a guy who left, like I said, left the UFC at an interesting moment and then went on to do very well for himself in Bellator and arguably maybe even had a better Bellator career than he did in the UFC. Obviously, in Bellator, he fought a lot of legends and guys who are way past their prime. I think of guys like Chet Congo, who was shot to bits. Fedor was shot to bits. Lyoto shot to bits. Matt Mitrione, King Mo. All these guys absolutely cooked by the time Ryan Bader was fighting them. But to be fair, you can only beat what's in front of you. And Ryan Bader's no spring chicken himself. A very experienced guy. And Ryan Bader's one of these guys that I was thinking, when I saw that he's left PFL, I was thinking he's the sort of guy that could walk into a UFC heavyweight title shot, probably lose, and then just stick around the rankings as a top 15 guy for the rest of his career, maybe. Because the heavyweight division really hasn't progressed too much in terms of skill. Obviously, the guys that were at the top of the heavyweight division when Ryan Bader was in the UFC aren't the same guys that are still in the top of the division now, but in terms of skill and ability, they're not like generations better than the previous generation, if that makes sense, where you see divisions like featherweight and lightweight, welterweight, bantamweight, they've really progressed in terms of passing the torch to the new guard, right? But you see a lot of these old UFC heavyweights, a guy like Orlovsky, up until like a few years ago before he got cut, like he was still winning fights in the UFC. Whereas if he was one of these older guys at the lower divisions, he would be getting cooked regularly. Like if he was like a lightweight with his sort of style and the way he was as a fighter, he'd be probably being slept every fight, right? He'd be like Bobby Green, right? So I think Ryan Bader could come into the UFC, do a Kai Asakura, get a world title shot, lose, and then just stick around the top 10, top 15 for the rest of his career if he wanted to. Obviously, him coming in, if he was to join the UFC, they'd bill him as, a former Bellator 2-weight world champion. And to be fair, that is a huge accolade. Because even though he's fighting washed up guys, he is fighting legends of the game. To be fair, like I said, fought Fedor twice, beat him twice in the first round. That's a huge accomplishment. It's not really because Fedor was absolutely shot to bits by this point, but still, to have 2 first-round finishes over Fedor on your resume is very impressive. It always will be for me. Matt Mitrione was an old guy who was never really that good, but again, because it's heavyweight MMA, he was able to make a career for himself and stick around for a very long time, but he's really nothing special in terms of being a fighter. Obviously, he lost to Vadim Nemkov for the light heavyweight title, which no shame in that because again, Vadim Nemkov, similar to Ryan Bader, is one of these guys that able to dominate 2 weight divisions. Vadim Nemkov done his thing at Bellator in light heavyweight and then went up to heavyweight and again done his thing. 1 match, 1 fight. Vadim Nemkov is another one of these guys that's one of the best fighters at the heavyweight division outside of the UFC, but we'll talk about Vadim Nemkov another time. This one's about Ryan Bader, right? But yeah, Ryan Bader, he's even got wins over guys like Lyoto Machida, Chet Congo, Fedor. Like I said, some really big wins here. He's got some losses as well. He didn't go unbeaten in Bellator. He lost to Corey Anderson, which is a really quite a bad loss because, again, Corey Anderson's a guy who's really nothing insane. He's well-rounded, to be fair. He's a good wrestler, and he's clearly got some power in his hands. He got enough power in his hands to stop Ryan Bader in the first round, so you can't knock him for that. Yeah, Vadim Nemkov and Corey Anderson, and then, of course, the final loss against Renan Ferreira, the Brazilian heavyweight at PFL. But Ryan Bader's definitely had an interesting career. I'd wanted to see him back in the UFC, personally. Like I said, I think they could do a Kai Sakura, give him a title shot in his first fight, and then just keep him around as a top 15 guys to either, sort of build up other guys, or if he is able to put some wins together, he's back in the title shot, because heavyweight's a razor-thin division. And I'm surprised PFL haven't wanted to keep on to him. Well, we know why PFL's not keeping on to him, because he's probably on a big contract, which is the case for a lot of these guys that PFL are letting go. But for me, that really just begs the wider question: why on earth did PFL buy Bellator then? If you're just gonna let their biggest names go, like that's why you're buying a company like Bellator. You're buying it so you can have their biggest names. You're not buying Bellator so you can have the guys who are like 5-2 on like $3 or $4 a fight. You're not signing them for them guys. I mean, it feels like that's what they've signed them for, because they'll just be used as tournament fodder, which is. It is what it is. It's PFL. They're their own business. They can do what they want. But very weird for me. And the sort of decision that I think really isn't good for MMA, because now you've just taken away one less place for these guys to go and fight and make money. So that's my thoughts on it. But hey, we'll see what's next. I'd be curious to know what you guys think. Do you want to see Ryan Bader back in the UFC? Or do you think there's still options for him outside of the UFC? You've got ONE FC. Obviously, PFL's no longer an option. He's left there. There aren't really any other MMA promotions, I'll be real. Rising, potentially. I could see that as a good fit. Obviously, he's got the history with Fedor, and guys like Lyoto and all that, and Japan. They love all that stuff. Maybe Rising could be a good option for him. Heavyweight division at Rising could be very interesting for Ryan Bader. But yeah, let's see what's next for him. Obviously, he's left PFL. I want to see him back in the UFC, but ball's in Ryan Bader's court. It's another episode of the Seth Solo Side Quest in the bag, episode 81, and I'm out. Peace.